The studio lights were bright as day on the set of American Perspectives Live. It was a primetime show known for its heated debates on politics, policy, and culture. But tonight, something in the air hinted that this debate would be unlike any other. The set was sleek and modern. Polished glass desks, bold graphics projected on giant screens behind the speakers, and a live studio audience that buzzed with anticipation. Every seat was filled, and every eye in the room was fixed on the two figures who were about to take the stage. At the center of it all was Karoline Leavitt, a rising star in the political arena. Karoline wasn't just any politician. She had built her reputation on unwavering principles and a knack for connecting with people. With a calm smile and an aura of quiet determination, she sat upright at her desk. Her posture was perfect, her eyes steady and confident. She looked every bit the part of a leader who had nothing to hide and everything to give. In her tailored blazer, and with a touch of subtle makeup that accentuated her expressive features, Karoline was ready to tackle whatever questions were thrown her way. Across from her sat Marcus Reed, a veteran journalist renowned for his sharp, relentless questioning. Marcus had spent decades in the field, honing an approach that was as uncompromising as it was effective. He'd earned a reputation for not pulling punches and for challenging his guests until every angle of their argument was laid bare. Tonight, his reputation preceded him. His eyes, dark and observant, scanned the room as he prepared to lead the discussion into both familiar and uncharted territory. For the first 20 minutes, the debate followed a well-worn path. Marcus asked questions about economic strategies, government regulations, and the ever-complicated world of public policy. Karoline, ever the polished communicator, handled the rapid-fire questions with ease. She delivered her well-prepared responses with clarity, weaving in statistics, policy insights, and a genuine concern for the people she represented. The audience nodded along, clearly impressed by her articulation and poise. There was a rhythm to the exchange, a back and forth that felt both professional and respectful. And yet, beneath that surface of civility, there was an electric tension that hinted at something more personal waiting to unfold. Then Marcus leaned forward. His eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift that only a seasoned observer would notice. Karoline, he began in a measured tone. You often speak about community values and the importance of hope in leadership. You've argued that our nation's progress is fueled not just by data and economic policy, but by something more intangible, by faith, by belief in a better tomorrow. Yet, critics say that in today's modern society, faith is nothing more than an outdated crutch, a relic of a bygone era. They say that in a world where science and technology provide answers to every problem, clinging to faith is irrational. What do you say to those who argue that belief is holding us back? A murmur swept through the studio audience. The question wasn't merely about policy. It cut straight to the heart of who Karoline was. For a long moment, the air was thick with silence. Karoline's eyes flickered as she absorbed the weight of the question. She didn't rush. Instead, she tilted her head ever so slightly, as if considering the best way to answer something that had challenged her beliefs as deeply as it had her intellect. Marcus, she said softly at first, then steadily, what you just asked isn't about politics. It's about life. It's about the moments when you're faced with the impossible, when all the data in the world can't explain why your world is falling apart. And believe me, I've been there. Her voice, though measured and calm, held an undercurrent of emotion that captured everyone's attention. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every nuance of her expression as she continued. I remember a time many years ago when I was fresh out of college and working as a legislative assistant in Nashville. I was young, idealistic, and convinced that policy was the answer to every problem. I believed that if we could just get the numbers right, if we could just draft the perfect bill, then everything would fall into place. But life has a way of teaching you lessons that no amount of data can explain. Marcus's eyes stayed fixed on her, his gaze intent, while the audience leaned in, drawn by the sincerity in her voice. I met a woman named Margaret, Karoline went on, her tone softening as she recalled the memory. Margaret was 72 years old. I met her at a community outreach event for seniors. I was there to take notes, to listen, to do my job. But Margaret, she stopped me in my tracks. Not with grand gestures or loud proclamations, but with her quiet, steady presence. She paused as if to let the memory sink in. Margaret had lost 2 of her sons, one to cancer, and one to a drunk driving accident. She'd lost her husband to a stroke and had no close family left. And yet, despite all that pain, despite all the darkness that could have consumed her, Margaret sat there smiling. She sipped her tea, asked me how I was doing, and shared with me her secret. Karoline's eyes shone as she spoke, and for a moment, it was as if the entire studio had fallen silent, hanging on her every word. Margaret told me that she woke up every morning and thanked God. Not because her life was easy or because she'd been spared hardship, but because she was still here, because no matter what happened, she believed there was still purpose in every day. And that, Marcus, is what I believe in. Faith isn't about having all the answers or proving something scientifically. It's about what keeps you standing when everything else has crumbled around you. It's the quiet, stubborn hope that tells you to keep going, even when the odds are stacked against you. A beat of silence followed her words. The studio lights seemed to glow a little warmer as Karoline's story settled over the audience like a comforting blanket. Marcus shifted in his seat. His expression, which had once been hard and unyielding, softened ever so slightly. "So you're saying," he said, his voice quieter now, "that belief isn't a crutch, but rather the very thing that makes life worth enduring? That it's what gives people the strength to carry on, even in the face of overwhelming loss?" Karoline smiled gently. "Exactly," she replied. "Faith isn't about ignoring reality or dismissing the challenges we face. It's about acknowledging that sometimes logic alone can't capture the full picture. It's about embracing the fact that we are more than the sum of our failures and successes. It's about recognizing that even in the darkest moments, there's a light, a reason to keep fighting." The audience erupted into applause, a slow, thoughtful clapping that resonated with the profound honesty of her words. Social media lights began to flicker as cameras caught every moment, and soon, snippets of her story were being shared online, analyzed by commentators, and discussed in coffee shops across the country. Marcus, now leaning back with a thoughtful expression, allowed himself a moment of reflection before he spoke again. "I have to admit, Karoline," he said, "your words have a way of cutting through the cynicism. I've spent my career questioning everything, questioning policies, ideologies, and even the motivations of those in power. But what you just said, it reminds me that sometimes the most powerful answers aren't the ones that can be measured on a chart or fact-checked on a spreadsheet. They're the ones that come from lived experience." He paused, and the audience listened, captivated by this rare moment of vulnerability from a man known for his relentless skepticism. "But then," Marcus continued, "there's the argument that religious institutions, for all their inspirational moments, have also been responsible for some of the worst atrocities in history: wars, oppression, corruption. How do you reconcile that with the idea of faith as a unifying, sustaining force?" Karoline's face remained serene. "I won't deny that history is marred by the misuse of faith," she said, her tone measured and sincere. "There are moments when religion has been twisted into a weapon, a tool to divide, to control, to justify inhumanity. But that doesn't mean that belief at its core is flawed. Think about it. Many of the greatest acts of courage and compassion in history have been inspired by a deep sense of faith. The abolition of slavery, the civil rights movement, countless hospitals, schools, and charities, these were all built on the belief that people are worth fighting for. Faith, in its purest form, is not about dogma or blind adherence. It's about hope, resilience, and the unwavering belief that even in our darkest moments, we can find a reason to keep going." The intensity in the studio was palpable. Even Marcus, who had been prepared to tear down her arguments with sharp criticism, seemed to be reeling from the weight of her convictions. The audience was rapt, and for a long moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant clatter of cups from the studio's refreshment area. Then, as if sensing that the moment was too precious to be rushed, Karoline leaned in a little closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper that carried across the set. I once asked Margaret, "How do you do it? How do you bear such loss and still manage to smile?" And she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "Karoline, every morning I wake up and thank God not because my life is easy, but because I've been given another day. Another day to love, another day to learn, another day to fight for what's right." That, to me, is the very essence of faith. A hush fell over the room as her words sunk in. It was as if every person in the studio, from the crew to the audience, was holding their breath, absorbing the raw, unfiltered truth of her testimony. The camera zoomed in on Karoline's face. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her expression was one of resolute strength. Marcus cleared his throat. "I think I need a moment to process that," he admitted, his usual biting retort replaced by a contemplative silence. "Your story, it's not something I expected. It's not a debate I've seen 1,000 times before. It's a reminder that sometimes the most compelling arguments are the ones that come straight from the heart." The debate continued for a few more minutes, with Marcus attempting to steer the conversation back to policy and measurable facts. But the tone had irrevocably shifted. Karoline's story had planted a seed, a question about what really sustained us during life's most challenging moments. When the debate finally wrapped up, the applause was slow and thoughtful. There were no flashy sound bites, no dramatic final lines. Instead, there was an overwhelming sense that everyone in that studio had witnessed something transformative. Later that evening, as the cameras went off and the crew began to pack up, Karoline sat quietly at her desk, scrolling through her phone. Her notifications were exploding, messages, emails, and social media posts pouring in from viewers across the nation. Headlines began to appear. Karoline Leavitt shatters the debate on faith and policy, a moment of truth, when hope and resilience triumph over cynicism, and American Perspectives Live, the debate that made us rethink everything. Some messages were from longtime supporters, others from critics who admitted that her words had struck a chord. One email in particular caught her eye. It was from a woman named Rebecca, who wrote, "I haven't stepped into a church in 20 years. I lost my faith long ago, but your debate moved me. I sat in my car, tears streaming down my face, realizing that I'd been missing something essential all along. Thank you for reminding me that hope isn't just an emotion, it's a lifeline." Karoline read and reread the email, feeling a mix of pride, humility, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. She had set out to debate policy, to defend her ideas with logic and reason, but what she had delivered that night was something far more personal, a glimpse into the very core of what it means to be human. In the days that followed, the debate continued to dominate headlines and social media feeds. People from all walks of life shared their own Margaret stories, tales of personal loss, resilience, and the quiet strength that kept them going when all hope seemed lost. Political pundits, usually quick to dismiss such narratives as sentimental, found themselves pausing to reflect on the profound impact of Karoline's words. Marcus Reed, ever the consummate journalist, was unusually quiet in the immediate aftermath. In a rare move, he took to Twitter at exactly 8:37 a.m. the following morning with a single, unadorned post. "I've been in this business for over 30 years. Last night, I walked away from a debate with more questions than answers. And that, in itself, is a powerful lesson." That tweet, simple and honest, resonated across the media landscape. It sparked discussions not just about faith and policy, but about the very nature of debate and the human need for hope. Late-night talk shows began to cover the debate, not with mockery or partisan vitriol, but with genuine curiosity. Podcasts, blog posts, and op-ed pieces emerged, all echoing the sentiment that Karoline Leavitt's testimony had shifted the way people thought about the intersection of faith, hope, and leadership. For Karoline, the experience was both exhilarating and humbling. In the following weeks, she received invitations to speak on various programs and participate in panel discussions. Each time she stepped up to share her story, she recalled that electric moment in the studio when the debate had transformed from a clash of ideologies into a heartfelt conversation about the resilience of the human spirit. And every time, she emphasized the simple truth she had learned from Margaret. that even in the face of overwhelming loss and despair, the belief that tomorrow might bring a little more light is what keeps us going. As the summer gave way to fall, Sierra Grill itself became a symbol of transformation. The once familiar din of everyday chatter now carried an undercurrent of hope. Regulars spoke of Karoline Leavitt and her debate as if it were a turning point, not just in politics but in life. In quiet corners of the restaurant, patrons exchanged stories of their own struggles and triumphs. The local newspaper ran a feature titled Faith, Hope, and a Debate That Changed Everything. And social media was abuzz with hashtags like #TurningPointDebate and #HopeLivesOn. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Karoline was leaving a televised interview in a nearby studio, she paused on the sidewalk outside to catch her breath. The air was cool, and the sky stretched out in a brilliant canvas of blues and oranges. As she looked around, she noticed a small group of people gathered near the entrance of Sierra Grill. Curious, she walked over and overheard snippets of conversation. One woman said, "I never thought a debate could make me feel this connected. It was like I finally understood that hope isn't just for the lucky, it's for all of us." Another man remarked, "Karoline's story reminded me that sometimes, the only thing keeping me from giving up is that faint belief that things can get better." A young college student, eyes bright with emotion, added, "I'm going to start writing about this. We need to share these stories, so people know that even in the darkest times, there's a reason to keep fighting." Karoline felt her heart swell with gratitude. In that moment, it wasn't about winning a debate or scoring political points. It was about touching lives, inspiring change, and reminding people that every day is a new opportunity to find hope. Over the next few months, Karoline continued her work with renewed vigor. She remained a formidable presence on American Perspectives Live, but now, her appearances carried an added depth, a reflection of the personal transformation she had experienced that night. The story of Margaret, the quiet strength of a woman who had endured unimaginable loss and still found reasons to smile, became a recurring theme in her speeches and interviews. And every time she spoke of it, she made sure to emphasize that faith, whether in a higher power, in humanity, or in the simple possibility of tomorrow, was not a crutch but the very essence of resilience. Marcus Reed, too, found his own perspective shifting. In his columns and interviews, he began to question not only the policies and ideologies he had spent years dissecting, but also the human cost behind them. "Last night," he once wrote, "I witnessed a debate that transcended the usual back and forth of political discourse. It was a moment of raw honesty, a reminder that sometimes the most profound answers are the ones that come from the heart." The impact of that debate rippled outward, touching people in unexpected ways. In homes across America, conversations sparked around dinner tables, in classrooms, and even in boardrooms. Some found solace in Karoline's words, while others challenged themselves to look beyond the numbers and statistics that so often dominated public discourse. It was as if the debate had opened a door to a broader conversation, one that acknowledged the messy, beautiful reality of human life, where hope and despair, faith and reason, coexisted in delicate balance. For Karoline Leavitt, the night of the debate remained a defining moment in her career. It wasn't just that she had faced a formidable opponent in Marcus Reed. It was that she had spoken her truth, shared her vulnerability, and in doing so, had given voice to something universal. And while the political battles would continue, the lesson that night would forever remind her that every interaction, no matter how fleeting, carries the potential to change a life. As autumn faded into winter, and the nation grappled with its own uncertainties, Karoline's message took on an even greater resonance. In her quiet, reflective moments, she would often recall the simple yet profound words that had echoed in the studio that night. "Every interaction is an opportunity. Use it well." Those words became a mantra not only for her but for countless others who had been touched by her story. In time, the debate came to be remembered as a watershed moment in political discourse, a moment when the discussion shifted from mere numbers and policies to something much more human. And as Karoline Leavitt continued her journey, traveling across the country, engaging with communities, and inspiring countless individuals, she carried with her the memory of that transformative night. a night when a debate became a conversation about the very soul of what it means to persevere. If you ever find yourself caught in the daily grind, questioning whether there's any meaning to the struggles you face, remember Karoline's story. In a world where data and logic often reign supreme, it is the quiet, unmeasurable power of hope and resilience that sustains us. It's not about winning every argument or having all the answers. It's about finding that spark of faith, that belief in a better tomorrow, and holding on to it no matter what. And so, as the lights dimmed on that fateful evening and the cameras finally shut off, the legacy of Karoline Leavitt's words continued to echo. Across living rooms, coffee shops, and social media feeds, her message reminded us all that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit can endure, and that every interaction, every shared moment of vulnerability, is an opportunity to build a future filled with hope.